James Wan and Lee Ranell really know how to make a great horror franchise. Let's rank all 5 Insidious movies. Hey guys, welcome to a new horror franchise ranking by J. Mayer. And since the new Insidious movie came out, it's the perfect time to rank all the Insidious movies. And the Insidious franchise is a horror franchise that I really like. I would consider it one of my favorite horror franchises. Maybe not top 5, but certainly in my top 10. And the Insidious franchise is really like these ghost stories, demon possession films. And I'm not really a big fan of that kind of subgenre of horror. I'm not really big on ghost stories or on demon possession films. They don't really do it something for me. However, the Insidious movies, they do work for me. And I would even say that they are the best ghost horror franchise in my opinion. They are really my kind of ghost stories. And the whole world they built, James Wan and Lee Ranell in this franchise is very excellent with the further, the spirit world as the further is called, and how to go to the further, and all those demons and spirits and entities that are in the further that are looking for bodies to possess, and it's a great world building in the horror genre. And James Wan and Lee Ranell, Wan as the director, Ranell as the writer, they did a really good job creating this franchise. And it all started back in 2010 with Insidious, with the focus on the Lambert family, and with the sequel, also directed by James Wan, also with the focus on the Lambert family. After that, Lee Ranell directed a movie of himself, with Insidious Chapter 3, and that's the first of the prequel movies. Also, the fourth one, called The Last Key, is a prequel movie. And those two prequel movies really focusing on the investigations that are done by the character Elise and their two sidekicks, Specs, even played by Lee Ranell himself, and Tucker. And then now, this year, we have a new Insidious movie, the 5th one. And this time we go back with the Lambert family and how they are dealing with all those demonic stuff 10 years later with an older Dalton. I did a whole review on Insidious 5. If you're interested in my thoughts on that movie, please check out my review. It would already be posted on my channel, so always welcome to check out that video. Anyhow, let's get to the ranking, shall we? And I have to say, I like all these 5 movies. There are, of course, movies that are way better than some of those bottom places. But someone has to be last, and in my case, that is Insidious Chapter 3. And this is the movie that the writer, Lee Ranell, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, directed himself. And I believe this is the directorial debut. So yeah, he directed an Insidious movie. It's still a fine movie, it's okay, I can watch it, I have my fun with it. But for me, this is really the weakest one of the franchise, the least interesting one. It's the first prequel movie, and the most interesting part on this movie is that it focuses on how Elise met Tucker and Specs and how they team up. The story is also fine. Quinn, the character that is tormented in this movie, is a really cool character. I really like the setting of this apartment duplex. It's a cool setting. The problem is that the entity of this movie is not the best entity. Though he had some potential, but I just don't know, he didn't work for me. And the entity is the Breathing Man, that is what he's called. And I think the problem is that he is not a mystery. Lee Ranell showed him too many times. And really, as soon as the movie starts, we already see the breathing man. So there is not a lot of mystery. So there is not a lot of scare factor in this movie. And that's what brings this movie down. And that's a shame, because I really hoped Leo Magnell would have delivered a better movie. But like I said, it's still a fine Insidious movie, just the least interesting one. At number 4, we have the fourth one, The Last Key. And this one I really like. It did not reach the levels of the Insidious movies with the focus on the Lambert family, but still, I really dig this movie. It's a very interesting story. The entity in this movie is a lot better than the Breathing Man. I forgot what the entity is called, but this entity with the keys for fingers. And they realized the problem of the Breathing Man. So this entity is not shown that much in the movie. They kept him more as a mystery. We only see parts of him in the shadows. And that makes him more scary, and that is what the Insidious movies need. We have to know that the entity exists, but we don't always have to see the entity. At the end of the movie, we see the entity in his full, without being in the shades. He's still scary, but the mystery is not wrong there. So, but all in all, I really like the story. I think the investigation of Elise and her team is much better in this movie than in chapter 3. I really like that they are focusing on the past of Elise, because the investigation is about the first house where Elise lives in. And how the entity works in this movie is really interesting. That was a surprise. And this movie has some surprises in this story department, and how the story develops is very interesting, with some twists and turns that I really like. So The Last Key is actually a very cool Insidious movie. I really had a great time watching it. But like I said, the Insidious movies are at their best when the focus is on the Lambert family. So the third movie in the Insidious movie in this ranking is Chapter 2. Also a movie that is directed by James Wan, which I consider as one of the greatest horror directors ever. If I do a Mount Rushmore of horror directors, he is definitely one of those 4. I really like James Wan, his horror movies. And in Insidious Chapter 2, a movie that picks up where the first movie left, is a very interesting sequel, because it's not copy-paste of the first movie. It still feels like an Insidious movie. It still continues the story of the Lambert family, but James Wan and writer Lee Burnell do things a bit differently in this movie. Like, in this movie, Joss is possessed by a spirit, an evil spirit. I think they call him a parasite. It's the old woman who was already introduced in the first movie. And Patrick Wilson does a really great acting job, because at the start of the movie he's still normal, but as long as the movie processes, we see that the spirit is more possessing this body, and Joss is more and more becoming the old woman. That is very interesting, and Patrick Wilson played that part perfectly. But there is also another plotline in this movie. The more interesting plot is when Spax and Tucker and Lorraine, the mother of Joss, together with Carl, an old associate of Elise, are trying to figure out which spirit has possessed Joss. And their whole investigation is really interesting to follow. And how the two stories merge at the end is perfectly. So in Insidious Chapter 2, also they did some experimental with the referrer. We learn more about the referrer in this movie, to Joss, who is trapped in that world, and how his journey is in this world. There is some time traveling even in this movie, so there are interesting stuff in Insidious Chapter 2. Really great story, but it's not as great as my first two picks. They really do greater stuff with this story material. And at number 2 we have the new movie, The Red Door, directed by Patrick Wilson himself. And like I said in my review, it's an Insidious movie with a different feel, different kind of horror movie, but I don't mind that. I really like the direction they took with this movie, on what they are focusing on this movie. It's more a dramatic horror movie, but still with an effective, scary atmosphere. So The Red Door, I really like this movie for what it is. I think it's a masterpiece on its own way, and it really works because it's a very different feel. So The Red Door, it has to be my number 2. I really like this movie. I was really fascinated by this movie, so it deserves this second spot. But of course, the best movie in this franchise is the first one, directed by James Wan and written by Lee Whannell. Insidious from 2010, I really think this is a scary movie. Maybe because I was still at a young age when I first watched it. I think James Wan directed this movie very phenomenal. His camera movements, the way he focuses on with the camera, how he creates this eerie atmosphere, it's very done perfectly. And as long as the movie progresses, the movie gets better and better. And I think the entity of this movie is the best of the franchise, and this is also the reason why this entity is brought back in the 5th movie and not the others. And that is the Lipstick Demon, or the Red Demon. I really like this demon. This is my favorite demon of the franchise. I think he's actually a very scary look, and the way they use him in this movie, in this first movie, was very done perfectly. And also the role to introduce, the explanation what happens to Dalton, that he does astral projection, that when he is asleep his spirit body leaves his physical body and he goes to the spirit world, but if he goes too far in this world he might get lost, and then this demon, so the Red Demon, possesses this body. And that is actually a very scary idea, and I really like this movie, guys. Insidious is such a great horror movie for me. And for me it's the best ghost movie. Like I said at the start, I'm not really big on ghost stories, ghost horror movies, but Insidious really did it for me. And I would even say that it is one of my favorite horror movies because it's that effective. So that's why it's my favorite movie in this franchise. And like I said, I like all the movies in this franchise. It's one of my favorite horror franchise. I really like it. So this is my ranking. This is how I rank all the Insidious movies. You don't have to agree with me, it's all subjective. But always be welcome to share your ranking of the Insidious movies in the comments. I would really love that. If you want to see more videos of me in the future, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification button and you get notified of any new videos I do. And glad that you already watched this movie. Hope you enjoyed it, and till the next time.